Agroforestry Partnerships in the Partnerships in Action track. This is Jensen. Jeff's the program manager for Trees Forever, working watersheds, buffers, and beyond program in Iowa, and he's a field coordinator in Northwest Iowa. He's got a bachelor's degree in communication studies and has worked in the field of sustainable agriculture for more than a decade. Jeff's also a little nutty, and I know this well. He's active with the Iowa Nut Growers Association, Minnesota Hazelnut Foundation, and the Upper Midwest Hazelnut Development Initiative. He grows and markets hazelnuts from a family farm in northern Cassuth County. So let's welcome Jeff.
Thank you. Okay, can everybody hear me? I have a dynamic voice, so usually a microphone's not needed, but we'll take it because I think they were going to be recording in the back. So welcome. I get the opportunity to talk about agroforestry, and I could go on and on and on and on and on, but we're going to keep it to about a half hour here. And I'm going to talk specifically about some of the partnerships that are required for agroforestry, because agroforestry is a little bit different. In fact, a raise of hands, who knows what agroforestry is? Okay, a little shy hand in the back there, maybe some components of it, right? And I'll ask that a question again in part of my presentation here, but I wear many different hats, and so in addition to being a field coordinator and program manager with the nonprofit Trees Forever, I'm also president of the Iowa Nut Growers Association, so the nut puns and the nut jokes, they're never ending. Just full disclosure, right? And then I'm also a founding member of the Minnesota Hazelnut Foundation. Like I said, Upper Midwest Hazelnut Development Initiative. If you were to Google Midwest Hazelnuts, that would be the website for that group that's essentially trying to develop hazelnuts as a viable commercial crop, third crop for the Midwest, a perennial crop. So without further ado, let's jump into agroforestry partnerships. But first, a little bit about Trees Forever. So Trees Forever, our mission is to plant and care for trees and the environment by empowering people, building community, and promoting stewardship. We were incorporated in 1989, so we recently celebrated our 25-year anniversary. And since that time, we've planted over 3.4 million trees. We have a staff of 22 that's roughly split between office staff in Cedar Rapids and then field coordinators like myself. So I handle Northwest Iowa. We have someone in Southwest, Northeast, Southeast, and then in the Des Moines metro area, and then around the Cedar Rapids metro area. And we also have 2 staff members in Illinois, so we're also active in Illinois. And we have been part of and received national recognition for projects. Since our inception, we typically assist over 200 communities and landowners annually. We engage an average of 7,000 volunteers annually, and we essentially provide pass-through cost-share funding grants of about $500,000 every year through our partners at Alliant Energy, Black Hills Energy, Syngenta, and through the Department of Transportation. So very specifically, the program that I manage is our Working Watersheds, Buffers and Beyond program. And really excited to be talking about that because this year is our 20-year anniversary of that program. It's been around for 20 years, and it really got its start as a unique partnership with some of the work that Dick Schultz was doing at Bear Creek. And so at the time, Bear Creek was developed as a national demonstration project to essentially highlight these riparian buffer systems that the agroecology research team was working on at the time. And so the role that Trees Forever fulfilled was really to promote these riparian buffer systems and get them established out on the landscape. And so through a collaborative process where we brought in some funders to help cost share some of the installation and establishment of these riparian buffer systems, we were very successful in developing that program to the point where we can celebrate our 20-year anniversary this year. And so that program very specifically, I should mention that program, since its inception, has done a lot of good. So 1.7 million trees and shrubs planted, over 66,000 volunteer hours logged, 177 miles of stream bank protected, and then 9,100 acres of conservation buffer planting. So we're really proud of those accomplishments. Very specifically, the Working Watersheds, Buffers and Beyond Cost Share program is focused and geared towards rural landowners to do a wide range of conservation projects. So our name is Trees Forever, but we're much more than just trees and shrubs. shrubs. So we work with landowners across all spectrum of the perenniality on the landscape. So we're talking about native grasses, prairie planting and establishment, it's even something as simple as grassed waterways, right? The strips that Iowa State's promoting. So we certainly like to speak for all of those practices of perennials on the landscape overall. And so within that context, certainly we're going to be focused on riparian forest buffer plantings. We're going to look at different agroforestry type plantings that incorporate trees and shrubs. But again, we're going to be looking at doing pollinator habitat. We have a pollinator habitat program and other perennial-based cropping systems. The program allows for 50% cost share up to a maximum of $2,000 plus some technical assistance. And we typically select 10 projects each year. Applications are due at the end of the year, so December 31st. For our pollinator program, we have a separate application for that. It's typically in August and provides $1,000 of cost share. So if you're a rural landowner or you work with rural landowners, this is a modest pot of money, but it's certainly something that can help maybe incentivize a landowner to do a project. And these funds can also be utilized with CRP, so that's another bonus as well. So, what is agroforestry? I asked earlier, who knows what agroforestry is? We had one person kind of tepidly put their hand up. So, most people don't really know what agroforestry is, but if I were to ask you, who here knows what a riparian buffer is? Raise your hand. Ah, just about everybody, right? Who knows what a windbreak or a shelter belt is? And just about everybody. Alley cropping? Maybe. That's what maybe a little bit. Silvopasture? Mushroom farming? Okay, now let's put that in. So all of these that I just mentioned are basically practices that comprise agroforestry. So when I think of agroforestry, I really do think of it as this marriage, right? This idealistic, this perfect marriage of agriculture and forestry. And it's not one or the other, it's really this holistic combining of the two. So we're growing trees, shrubs, other perennials, right, for a profit in a highly managed system, right? This combination of agriculture and forestry. So we're getting these benefits that forestry and perennials on the landscape provide, but yet we're actually managing them for a profit, for some sort of revenue generation. Another way to think about it, and this is kind of the textbook definition, is this intentional, very intentional combining of agriculture and working trees to create this sustainable farming system. And system is another word that we use when we talk about agroforestry, because it's not just one thing. If there's one thing that I want you to walk away with today, it's that agroforestry is certainly a system and it incorporates many different components. It's really a niche, it really is, because it doesn't have a well-structured or a well-defined infrastructure. You can't just take your nuts and berries down to the local co-op like you can with your corn and beans. It takes a different mindset and a different type of marketing plan. And marketing is very important to agroforestry. It's much more than just growing trees and shrubs and other perennials. But we'll get to that. In a nutshell, it's putting the right plant, the right place, for the right purpose. And that's how I kind of like to talk about agroforestry. It's really the right plant, right place, for the right purpose. Because even if we don't have production of nuts or berries or pounds of beef or board feet of lumber, even if we don't have any of that, we still have the ecological functions that are being provided by these perennials being out on the landscape. Right? So, when we talk about agroforestry practices, we basically have 5, and then they throw special applications in there. Alley cropping. So as the name implies, these are wide alleys. So we have wide rows of trees or shrubs, 120 feet at least, where we're growing these longer-term crops, trees and shrubs, and then in the middle of those rows, providing some sort of short-term, either forage, or it could be row crops, it could be vegetables, it could be any number of different things. But by going to this wide spacing, we're able to kind of maximize the production on a particular acre. We have your long-term crop growing. We also have some sort of short intermediate crop that we can get some revenue off of in those early years. Let's not forget, we're talking about perennials. So perennials, by their very nature, are taking time to establish root systems, to establish the structure of that tree or shrub before it's ever going to yield anything, whether that's nuts and berries or more feed, right? So that's alley cropping. A lot of different applications there in terms of what your trees and shrubs could be, what that crop in between the rows could be. Silvopasture. This one is not as predominant in the Midwest here, but really popular down in the southeast portion of the United States, where they have existing loblolly pine plantations that they're growing for lumber, that type of an application. And so they're also managing the forest canopy to allow enough light to penetrate to the floor so that they can additionally graze cattle. So silvopasture is this grazing of cattle and other ruminants, other grazers, within a forestry setting. But I want to stress one thing, and I have to stress it again. It's not simply letting cows or other grazers out into a woodlot, because nothing will destroy your woodlot quicker than an unmanaged grazing situation, right? And you can go to a lot of parts of Iowa and you can see where there used to be a real nice grove, and then some cattle or some other ruminants or other grazers were let in and essentially just destroy the trees, right? So it really is managed, because in this case with silvopasture, we're managing not only the canopy and the amount of light that penetrates to the floor so that we can have productive forages, but we're also managing those grazing animals so that we don't overgraze these areas. So silvopasture. It's an area that I think we can develop more in the Midwest here, especially when we think about some of the benefits that trees and shrubs can provide for shading in some degraded pastures. Forest farming. Forest farming, again, real simply, is typically landowners that already have a forest woodlot and they want to make it more productive and realize some income generation from it. So maybe you could do things like mushrooms or golden seal, right? Or maybe you have an existing woodlot with maple trees, so you're able to tap them for some maple syrup. So forest farming is kind of this catch-all of utilizing an existing woodlot to be productive and generate some income. Certainly we have two that we're real familiar with riparian forest buffers and then the field windbreaks. Riparian forest buffers, I just want to stress, are a system, right? That work done at Bear Creek with the riparian buffer system was just that, a system. Because it's not just planting trees and shrubs right along the open waterways, but it's really having this native grass component on the leading edge where your row crops are, transitioning into a shrub component, transitioning into then faster growing trees and shrubs, and then finally those slow growing trees and shrubs right along that bank. It's this entire system that makes riparian buffers so effective at reducing overland nutrient flow and sedimentation. So riparian forest buffers are another great opportunity to incorporate some of these perennial crops into these agroforestry practices. Windbreaks, we're looking at reducing the amount of wind and then managing snow and where it goes. And so this is a really popular one for Iowa because we have lots of snow and we have lots of wind. And so if we can, through the creation and establishment of rows of trees and shrubs, we can direct where that snow could potentially fall, keeping it off of our roadways and really improving safety conditions, as well as the amount of money that the DOT and our counties have to spend going up and down those roads to keep them clean. And then special applications is really kind of this catch-all. So that's where we consider things like the short rotation woody crops, where we're perhaps growing poplars or willows to be harvested every 3 to 4 years for some sort of bioenergy application or something like that. Again, kind of a catch-all that really looks at some unique situations where agroforestry can be effective. But this is what we're talking about. We're talking about agroforestry, these collective practices. Some of the benefits of agroforestry, I think it's important to stress these because intuitively we recognize that there's benefits to trees because of clean water, clean air, all these different things. But agroforestry, when we start growing trees and shrubs and incorporating these practices onto a farm or ranch, can have a number of benefits that are really going to help us to achieve the goals of the agro-nutrient reduction strategy, as well as ancillary goals as well. So, field windbreaks. One of the benefits that we can get from field windbreaks and shelter belts, and this is a little bit counterintuitive and not what you would necessarily think, is we can actually get a yield increase right next to that shelter belt or that windbreak. And the reason for that is, certainly there could be some potential competition from those trees and shrubs. There could be some potential shading. If you look at the picture in the upper left-hand corner, you can almost see where the corn is a little bit stunted in growth right next to that field windbreak. But then as you move out, looks about 20 feet or so, it gets a little bit taller, and then it comes back down the rest of the field. So what's that kind of showing is some of the moisture, right? So these field windbreaks, because they aggregate that snow right on the leeward side there can actually be some improvements for moisture retention. And so some work done by Court in 1988 actually showed some of these average crop yield increases, even if, and this is the take-home message, even if you count the acres taken out of production to put in that field windbreak, you can still achieve some of these increases in crop. And so I think that's really kind of amazing, and it is counterintuitive because we think that these trees and shrubs in these windbreak settings could potentially be yield robbing, but in fact, in many cases, they can actually boost yields. So here's several different graphs to look at, and this is all about water quality. So when we talk about agroforestry as a land management system, it can do a lot to reduce runoff. We have that in the upper left-hand corner, where we have these three different systems: an agroforestry system, a grass buffer system, and a control. And the control is essentially full tillage corn and soybeans. And by year, we can see how those different systems do in the amount of runoff that's achieved. And essentially, agroforestry performs very well compared to some of the other types of cropping systems. As we move to sediment, and of course sediment happens with runoff, so this is soil that's in that runoff. We have agroforestry, grass buffer, and a control, and we can see how much sediment was lost with those different practices. Agroforestry can be very beneficial to keep soil in place. It's all about roots in the ground, anchoring that soil, keeping it in place. When we look to surface runoff, total nitrogen, again, agroforestry compares to a grass buffer, to a control, we can see some significant reductions in runoff. So that's that root system keeping soil in place. That's the actual above ground biomass that's helping to slow down that water as it passes through the stems and trunks. Finally, in the bottom right, we have nitrate. And so we have the two different years. We have the three different scenarios: cropping system, grass, and agroforestry, and we're measuring nitrates. And so we can see some of the reductions, both for grass and for agroforestry compared to that row cropping system. And again, it's covered all year round, and it's these roots in the ground that are infiltrating and helping to reduce some of these nutrients. So this is what I mentioned when I said riparian buffer systems, right? So if we look at the schematic at the bottom here, we have our crop, whatever that might be, but then that next leading edge is going to be that native grass or fork mix, where we're going to have those stiff stemmed natives. Next to that, between the slow-growing trees and the fast-growing trees, we have that shrub component. This could be any number of different shrubs, but again, it's going to help to reduce the amount of overland flow and start to infiltrate through that root system. Then we have our slow-growing trees, our fast-growing trees, and then stream bank bioengineering. So this could be things like the willows that grow so good right next to the stream bank bed. So when we talk about this entire system, we can see how effective it can be in the reduction of total nitrogen, 50 to 80%, nitrates specifically, 41 to 92%. And I think it's important at this point to really talk about what's happening. So these reductions in nitrogen specifically are occurring wherever that nutrient-laden water interacts with the root zone of these trees and shrubs. That's what's denitrifying the water. So if you can imagine, we can't necessarily treat a lot of volume of nutrient-rich water full of nitrogen because we just can't pass it through those root systems fast enough, right? But what does come through that root system is significantly reduced in terms of the nitrates that are there. When we talk about phosphorus, it's a little bit different story. Phosphorus, we're talking about attached particles to soil. So as the soil moves, our phosphorus is moving, and guess what? Perennials like trees, shrubs, grasses, and forbs do a great job of keeping the soil in place because those root systems keep them firmly anchored. So some significant benefits that we can achieve to some significant benefits that we can achieve as we look at our goals for the agronutrient reduction strategy. A couple of other benefits, certainly we're looking at site movement of nutrients and chemicals through overland flow, similar to how the riparian forest buffer system works. Infiltration is going to help to decrease overland flow of those soluble nutrients, especially nitrogen. We look at carbon sequestration. So not only do we have this above ground biomass in trees and shrubs and grasses and forests, but we also have these extensive root systems. And of course, the age-old rule of thumb is whenever you see above ground, there's roughly twice below ground, right, in the biomass of these root systems. And you can see in the picture there, and of course, when we talk about taking carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and sequestering it, perennials do a real good job because they keep it sequestered for a very long time. Improved utilization of nutrient cycling, because we have these real deep root systems with trees and shrubs and even some of these native grasses. We can really help to utilize some of the nutrients that are buried deep in the soil profile, bring them up, and then as we have leaves that fall down, they can be incorporated into that top layer and that humus layer where a lot of our organic matter is. And then finally, wildlife applications. I mean, agroforestry is going to provide nesting habitat. It's going to provide nesting habitat not only for birds and mammals, but for bees and pollinators as well. It's going to provide a food source for a lot of different critters. Just the whole realm of agroforestry fits real well with wildlife habitat because it can also help to fill in these corridors and establish these corridors that animals can use to travel the landscape and keep protected and have those sources of food and forage. Wants to hear that joke?
I like puns.
So, there were two nuts. They were walking down a dark alley late one night. One nut turned to the other nut and said, "Be careful. I was in this alley just last week and was assaulted." It's a clean one, though. It's tough sometimes when nut jokes you find clean ones, right? So let's talk a little bit about agroforestry partnerships, right? So agroforestry requires many things, right? From the planning stage of right plant, right place for the right purpose, right? Production challenges to disease and pest issues for trees and shrubs, right? To just the simple fact of growing trees and shrubs for profit in a managed system, right? A lot is different about agroforestry production and agroforestry practices than the traditional row crop, right? So to successfully pull off agroforestry practices, we need many, many partnerships. So some of the things that we need in these different stages, the planning stage, the production stage, I threw harvesting and processing in there as separate from production because it almost is its own issue, right? Because of the equipment that might need to be involved, to the processing end of things. I mean, you got to crack nuts, right? You got to wash berries. If your berries don't taste very good, you got to process them and squeeze them for juice, right? All these different types of things are really crucial to actually getting a saleable product. And then the marketing. And let's be honest, sometimes the marketing aspect can be the least favorite aspect for farmers. They want to go out there and grow things. They know how to grow things. And so marketing plans sometimes go to the wayside or aren't fully implemented. Well, that's a marketing plan of just selling grain to your local co-op or an ethanol plant. Imagine that you've got to develop a marketing plan where you've got to go sit at a farmer's market for a while, or you've got to make calls to food co-ops to take orders and get orders placed into their stores. You have to maybe go and do demonstrations so that folks know what your product is. Maybe they've never had an Iowa-grown chestnut or an aronia berry, right? So there's a lot of different aspects, especially with marketing and marketing alone, that are going to be unique to agroforestry crops compared to some of your other more defined commodities. So as we look about all the different partnerships that are, what is successful for agroforestry plantings, these are the types of things that we have to think about, and thus we need to find partners in each of these areas that can help us to be successful. So, as we talk about planning, right, and essentially planning for an agroforestry practice or planting, there's a lot of questions that we have here. So here's my friend Ralph Storm. He's got the Boone River that every year takes more and more of his stream bank away, and he's trying to figure out, what do I do? Do I want to plant some trees and shrubs in an agroforestry setting? Well, the first thing he's going to have to figure out is what does he have for a land resource. And so that's where a call to his DNR district forester is going to be important. A call to his local NRCS or Soil and Water Conservation District office is going to be important to see what potential resources they may have for him to help him address this particular resource concern. Certainly, whenever we're talking about agroforestry crops, we have to talk about some of these specialty crop growers associations. So whether it's the Iowa Nut Growers Association, the Midwest Aronia Association, the Minnesota Elderberry Cooperative, right, the Iowa Christmas Tree Growers Association, any of these entities, they are going to be the entities that growers need to tap into to learn about the crop, to learn about how to grow it successfully here in Iowa, right? Because take something like chestnuts. Chestnuts are a fantastic agroforestry crop, and you can make more money with chestnuts than you can with corn and soybeans in southern Iowa on a site that's conducive to growing chestnuts, right? In northern Iowa, it's a crapshoot. In northern Iowa, we don't have slightly acidic soils, we have real heavy soils, right? So if you didn't know that, and you were decided to plant 100 chestnuts in my neck of the woods, in the Prairie Pothole region, it would be a crapshoot, it really would. To find a spot that's conducive to it, and then we have late freezes in northern Iowa that can freeze off those buds and essentially lose a crop. Not that you don't have late freezes in southern Iowa either, but just the point is that much further north, it's that much riskier, right? So those local growers organizations are really going to be crucial to help you understand what crop could potentially be planted, and then some production information about that crop. Certainly, if we're looking to do things with livestock, to incorporate livestock with an agroforestry planting, get in contact with those folks. Trees Forever, I have to mention them because I'm there, and I'm kind of the agroforestry guru in Iowa. There's others that are out there as well, but we've developed some publications. One of them is called A Landowner's Guide to Perennial Crop Options. It's a PDF that you can find on our website. And we highlight 6 different agroforestry crops, from aronia berries to chestnuts to elderberries to black walnuts, a number of different crops. And it has a chapter for each, as well as a case study that outlines a grower that's actually doing it, growing the crop, marketing the crop, the whole 9 yards. And so that's a nice PDF that's on our website. You can go and get the whole thing. You can get each individual chapters, but it provides a lot of base level reference information for agroforestry. Finally, existing growers, whether they're part of a organization, a growers organization or not, are going to be invaluable. Because first and foremost is they can kind of truth check some of the things you may have heard. There's a lot of folks that are promoting some of these various agroforestry crops, whether it's hazelnuts, chestnuts, aronia berries. We've heard aronia berries, and they're all the latest craze. Well, let me tell you something. I've got 2 neighbors that got burned, right? They put in a lot of aronia berries. They didn't have markets lined up. One of them spent $5,000 to get into a marketing co-op, and that went belly up. So a lot of people got burned. And part of it was they didn't do their research on the front end. Part of it is just boosterism, right? They wanted to get plants in the ground because they saw so many other folks getting involved with aronia berries. It's a superfruit. These plants are super productive, and you can get 10, 20 pounds per bush, right? Guess what? They don't taste very good. How are you going to sell something that doesn't taste very good, right? So little things like that. These existing growers can be truth checkers and invaluable. As we move on from the planning stage to the production stage, right? So how are we going to find information on how we grow some of these different crops? So essentially, again, we're going to be looking at some of these growers associations, any university extension services, and existing growers again. Field days are fantastic to pull folks out onto your property to let them see what you're growing and how you're growing. We do grafting workshops so that growers can get hands-on experience doing things, technical skills like grafting. But these are nice partnerships to have, and they're absolutely crucial. Harvesting and processing, you really, really need existing growers, because for some of these things, we're talking about making your own nutcracker out of PVC and an old aspirator and maybe a drill, right? So I can't express enough how important it is to have good relationships with existing growers, because in often cases, the equipment isn't well defined or developed for some of these niche type things. Or you have to go to another industry, like the pecan industry, to find equipment that will work for hazelnuts, for example. Finally, on the marketing aspect, you've got to have partnerships. You've got to have entities like the American Hazelnut Company that can help you process your nuts. You've got to have entities like the Iowa Food Co-op that can help you to market and get your name out there as someone who is doing aronia berries. You've got to have these partnerships, these aggregators that can help you get product into stores or into people's hands, because it's not as simple as just taking your nuts and berries down to the local cooperative. So a couple of acknowledgments. I just want to thank these individuals and these institutions. The National Agroforestry Center in Lincoln, Nebraska has a ton of information on agroforestry. You can spend a whole day there learning about agroforestry practices and crops. Jomi Zamora, agroforestry professor at University of Minnesota. A couple of the slides came from him today. Lois Braun, he's a researcher at University of Minnesota. A couple of her slides are in here today. Jason Fischbach, woody crop specialist with University of Wisconsin Extension. And then finally, the University of Missouri Agroforestry Center. Go look at that site. You can grow chestnuts in Iowa, and they're profitable, and they've got tons of information. So with that, I'll take any questions. Yes?
Looking at your beautiful slides, it reminds me of component crops when you say corn versus conifer or other trees, that the interaction between those two, that reminds me of the term in physiology called annidation.
Say it again.
Annidation in space and time.
I like it.
Yeah.
So I'll have to add that to the list of what
Yeah.
agroforestry
If you look
is.
at annidation, you will see that interaction between crops of different heights in
Precisely.
time and space.
Excellent. It's not a trade-off. It's not an either or,
Yeah.
right? One of the things that bothers me is that Iowa nutrient reduction strategy, and when they put together those practices and how much reduction you could achieve, and then they said, oh, by the way, this is what you're going to this is what you're going to do in terms of a yield decrease. And it's like, okay, I understand that. We grow corn in Iowa, right? But there are practices that actually produce something besides corn, right? And then all of these other benefits that you can achieve. So I'll get off my soapbox. But thank you for bringing that up. I appreciate that. Yeah, in the back.
We're seeing a lot of interest in chestnut trees in eastern Iowa, although we have very heavy clay soils,
Sure.
so I'm not sure that they're going to do real well. But one of the pushing points is that you can graze the cattle with them. How many years, though, before you can safely stick the cattle in there, or do you really have to armor those trees?
So without a doubt, it depends on what you're grazing. So things like cattle are going to require bigger and stronger cages, so to speak. Things like sheep, they can be a little daintier, and you can get away with sometimes tree tubes and management by keeping the forage to the point where they want to eat forage versus the plants themselves. Key point though, sheep like hazelnuts. I grow hazelnuts. I have sheep. I keep them separated. When they get out, I don't like it because they eat the hazelnuts. But yes, you can graze, especially in the early years, because you have all of this space when you have these small seedlings that you can put some animals in there. Now, where it really becomes a little more tricky is as you get bigger and bigger plants and you start to get some production, especially something like chestnuts, well, that's a little bit tougher to graze animals and chestnuts because chestnuts you pick up off the ground, you have to keep things sanitary, so you can't have any manure out there for I think it's 120 days or better. Well, that's the better part of your growing season. So there are some unique challenges once that time frame, when that transition starts, where you're starting to get some production.